Alright guys, this is the last tutorial of this little series. And we are going to connect the skin to the joints and then do some refining of how that works, and then you'll be done. But before we start that, I did find just a couple more little things that need to be fixed with our rig. And this just happens as long as you're doing rigging and you're checking and making sure that everything, works. You're going to find things that you missed that don't work or that need to be looked at again. So for instance, right here, I select my center of gravity and I try to move my character. See how the back and the hips like break right there? So that is not what we want. And all we need to do to fix that is just take this lowest back IK and then just parent it to the center of gravity. And now that is fixed. So that's one thing that I found. The other thing, and you might have noticed that I found it in the last video, is that my finger joints and my hands are off from my geometry. So, and this is actually not that hard to fix either. What I'm going to do is just adjust the orientation of a couple of joints. Now, we don't want to just select a joint and then rotate it, because that's going to mess up. It's going to pull our rig out of its default position. And we don't want to do that, especially not if before we've even bound it or anything. But what we can do is if I select, for instance, I'm going to start with this elbow joint right here. If I open the attribute editor, I'm just going to change the joint orientation a little bit, and that will start shifting it back into place. So the first thing I'm going to start adjusting is this joint orientation around the X axis. And that's going to be this right here. And what you could do is you could just start like typing in numbers to see what happens. But if you just hold down Control and then just left click and drag in here, that will start moving that number. And you can see that it's sort of shifting the position right there. So if you kind of get to a place where you can sort of see the angle, just start rolling that up until you get to where the angle looks right. So that's sort of matching the hand a lot better, I think. That's probably going to be fine. And you might find with your hand that you don't have this problem. So just bear with me while I fix this if that's the case for you. But if you have this problem, this is a really good way to fix it. So that's one thing that you can do. And then I have the same issue on the other side. So what I'll do is I'm going to take this joint orientation number that I just changed. I'm going to copy it, come over to my other elbow. First, let me extend that hand so we can see that a little better. Just going to put zeros in for all that. Select that elbow. And then in the attribute editor, I'm just going to paste that right in there. And you can see that that has shifted that back into place as well. So now the other thing that we need to do is, because it's still too low, it's still under the hand instead of right in the hand. So I'm just going to make adjustments on this hand joint as well. So, and I'm going to use, it's going to be the rotate Z this time. So I'm just going to do the same thing, use Control and just drag with the left mouse button in this box. And that's probably going to be good enough right there. You want to probably sort of look at it from all angles and make sure. Maybe I'll bring it back down a little, so it's right inside the fingers. Yeah, that's probably good. And then I'll take this number, copy it, come to the other side here, and then paste that in there. And that fixes that one as well. So now that little shift in my joints is fixed, and we've got the torso fixed and everything, and now we are ready to bind our skeleton to our mesh. And this is actually, it's a pretty straightforward, simple process. The part that it gets tricky is when you just are having to do the refining, which can just be a little bit time consuming, but it's pretty simple process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my geometry, shift select my root of my skeleton. So you get the whole skeleton selected. And I am going to come up here where it says skin and just tear this off because I'm going to need a few of these menu items probably. But the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to click this interactive bind skin. And what will happen is each one of these joints and bones is going to just reach out to the mesh and grab onto the vertices that are there. And then if you use this interactive skin bind, you'll get like a big sort of manipulator that you can work with to sort of adjust how much different vertices are affected by different joints. So let me just show you how it works, and then it'll make a little more sense then. But I'm just going to go ahead and click this interactive bind skin. And now this is that manipulator that I was talking about. And right now it's on the root. And what you can see is that you have sort of like this rainbow happening on the inside. And wherever it's sort of red is going to be most affected by the joint that's selected, which right now is the root. And then as it fades out to blue, it's going to be less affected by this joint and start to get more affected by other joints around it. So let's go ahead and we'll start working a little bit on the legs so you can kind of see. I'm going to just select this leg joint right here. And you can see all this red is being affected mostly just by this one hip joint right here. And then as it sort of fades down onto the leg here, it's going to be where it's more affected by this lower joint. And same up here. As it starts to fade off of this, it's going to be affected by the pelvis and the root and part of the spine. You're also seeing that it's kind of got a couple things on the other leg over there. That's something you definitely want to watch out for because you don't want to bend this leg and have part of this leg get stretched with it. So that, I think, is the first thing that I will fix. I'll just take this blue little line and move it over so that we are not affecting that half of the body. And I'll just scoot it just like that. That's going to be good. And then, let's see, maybe I'll squeeze this out a little. Well, that doesn't really help. And this is the process, just sort of tweaking this until you get it how you want. I think that this top part I will push down a little so it sort of lines up better with that sort of swimsuit line that you want to always have. That's probably going to be better. I'm going to lift this up so that it sort of stops right at the knee there. And the other thing that you can do that will be really helpful is start moving this skeleton around and see what happens. See if you run into issues. I'm going to bend this knee and lift this foot up. And you see that's actually starting to look pretty good right there. A lot of times you'll have this where it sort of pinches up and collapses. But I think that sort of pretty much fixed itself when we lifted up that thing. And then anytime you want, you can just come back and select a joint. Go here where it says interactive bind skin tool, and that will bring that manipulator back. So it's still a little pinchy right there. What we might be able to do is take this joint, push this down, and you can see that that's looking even a little bit better. You've got a weird collapsy business happening in the foot right there. So we can sort of lift that so that's not happening so badly anymore. And that fixes that pretty well. Maybe I'll take this and sort of widen it a little bit. And then maybe shift it back too. That way, that sort of turns that whole area a little more red. That's going to probably be better. And then I can take this and put this back down to 0. And then what you can do, because if I go ahead and show you this other side, see, that's where that sort of pinching and collapsing business that I was talking about. So that's not what you want. And we haven't adjusted anything on this side, but I have a symmetrical character, which means that we can mirror our skin weights to the other side. Because that's what this is. If we select this and turn on the interactive bind skin, this section is the skin weights. It's called skin weights. And what that just means is that how much each joint is affecting each vertex. There's a map that gets created, and it's the skin weight map. And we can mirror it over to the other side. If we just sort of select this, select our actual mesh here, and then mirror the skin weights. Let's go ahead and look at the options. And we want to make sure that we're going across the right axis, which is going to be, it's going to be the YZ, so that's correct there. And then let me just apply this. Whoa, see, that's no good. That's something bad has happened there. So let's go ahead and click off of this. So let's see. I wonder why that didn't work. That should have worked. Maybe it needs to be in the same position. Let me go ahead and put that back down. All right, now then, I'll try it again. So I've mirrored the skin weights. Oh yeah, that's much better. Okay, so that makes sense. So when you do your mirroring, you just want to make sure that your joints and your controls and everything are in the default position. Okay, otherwise it will just mirror it straight across and it won't be in the right place. Okay, so just make sure that you do that. Put it back in the default position, and then you can do your mirroring or make sure that they're the same on both sides. So now then, let's go ahead and look at this. Let's see what happens when we roll up our feet. And it looks pretty good for the most part, but we are getting a little bit of a dent that maybe we don't want. And we could go in with this interactive skin bind and try to work that out a little bit if we want, but it's so small that there's actually an easier way to fix that. So what we can do is we can come up here where it says paint skin weights, and I'll go ahead and click that. And actually, I'll open the option box because this is what we really need. And then I will select this joint right here. Let me select the joint first and then turn on the skin weights options. There we go. Now what happens in this is that you have this whole list of all of your joints. And we are looking right now at the left ball. So that's going to be this right here, the left ball joint. And if I highlight that, let me go ahead and do this again. That's the other thing that's a little tricky about rigging, is that you sort of have to make sure you have the right thing selected and in the right order. There we go. So now let me get that joint again. It's going to be my left ball joint there. And so this is what happens. All of this white stuff, all the whitest, lightest areas are going to be the most affected by this joint that's selected. So what we might want to do is, since this little pinky toe is starting to gray out a little bit in the side of the foot, maybe we should paint a little bit of that a little bit brighter. That way our feet don't sort of break when we start to bend our foot like that. So that's probably good. And then we can actually come up to the heel, and maybe we'll use that. We'll just sort of paint this out a little, so that kind of smooths that out a little. And maybe that's too much. You can sort of decide on that if you want. If you want to turn down the value, you can turn it down here, and that will paint a grayer color. That will sort of take out some of the influence that you've painted in. And then you're just sort of just manually adjusting your skin weight maps just by painting them. Because that's what this is. These are skin weight maps. And they work very similar to like a bump map or a transparency map or something like that. But what it just means is that everything that's white is going to be most influenced by a joint, and then everything that's black is not at all. And then the gray parts are sort of your in-between sort of transition areas. So that's another way, instead of just using this big interactive bind skin tool that you can start adjusting the weights. So let me go ahead, and I have both of these feet sort of rolled up now, and you can see there's that dent that we were trying to paint out and how it looks a little bit better on this side. And let me go ahead and try this. If I have this selected, I'm going to mirror my skin weights, and you can see that just shifts and just looks a little bit better now. And really, that's the whole process. You're going to go along to each of your joints. If you have a symmetrical character, you can just do one side and then do your mirroring on the other side whenever you need to. But you're just going to go along to each joint and just make sure that when you bend it, that it looks correct. I'm going to take another example up here. You've got our head. If I sort of rotate this head, actually, I should probably do the control because that's what you should be using anyway. See how the face stretches out really crazy? That means that you need to do some adjusting with this joint and probably all the neck joints. A neck is where you're going to have a lot of issues, probably. Same thing sort of on the front of the chest. But I'll come up here and let's get our interactive skin bind tool back on this joint here. See how much of like the neck is being affected by this joint and then the face is hardly at all. But this neck joint, this is the thing that moves the whole head. So we just need to make some adjustments here. So I'll lift this up, pull this out maybe move this down a little and out this way. So the whole face is just red as you can get it. And then see if we can try to adjust so that not as much of the neck is red. Now let's see how that's affected, how it moves. That's still really a problem. It's starting to get a tiny bit better, but it's still really a problem. So let's go ahead and look at this next joint. Get our interactive skin bind tool out. And actually, it's probably a good idea to just leave this open, hanging out over here. And yeah, see how we've got some of this is being affected clear up on the face. Let's move some of that down. Same thing here. That actually might need to be sort of widened and made bigger a little. I think one of the other things that's going to be an issue, these collarbones. Yeah, that's really huge and getting up on the face and everything. And you don't want that, obviously, because the collarbones are just supposed to move your shoulders. So let's bring that back quite a ways. We can move this down a little. And we probably want to have it more affecting the back than the front, so we can actually push this back some. Lift it up this way. Maybe even turn it. I don't know if that's going to help, but maybe. Get more of something like that happening. And that way, when we sort of start rotating, like shrugging our shoulders, it's still kind of pulling on the rib cage a little too much. But you can start to crunch those sort of chest muscles in a little. And then you can see on the back, you're kind of getting this idea of like a shoulder blade movement. But I still don't really like how it's stretching the ribs. So what I'll do is come back to this joint again, get the interactive skin bind tool again, and then see if I can lift that up. Or if it comes down to it, maybe just take that joint. Actually, let me get the skin because that's how it works better here. Get the skin weights. And then let me find that left collarbone here on my list. And then I can just start painting out some of that influence. You can hold down B and make your brush a little bit bigger if you want. I'm going to undo that, and I'm actually going to turn the value all the way down and start painting more like a darker. That's going to just make that be influenced a lot less right here. And that's really what I kind of want to do, is just this under the arm area. That doesn't need to really be influenced by the collarbone nearly that much. So now I'll select my controller here. And that's looking better, I think. I mean, there's still work that you can be done on this, but this is the whole idea of adjusting your skin weights. You're just going to go along to each joint, sort of, you know, bend it and see what happens. See, that elbow is collapsing very badly. So you just come along, select this, get your skin binding tool, and then just start making the adjustments. You know, make this bigger if you need to. Make this one, whoops, bigger if that's what you need to do as well. Reposition it. Maybe you need to work on this one a little bit too. Let's see. Or if maybe we can do some work with this. But yeah, this is the whole process. You're just going along and just making adjustments. Yeah, see, that's sort of what the issue is there. We need to sort of take out some of that influence of the elbow. And that looks a lot better. That's bending a lot more like we want. Maybe some of this needs to come back too. Back up to where the actual, see what happened right there? See how I pulled that and then just a weird stretching happened? That happens if you pull your interactive sort of manipulator too far and there's no joints influencing any vertices. They will just snap right to the origin. So all you have to do is either just push that back so that that stretching doesn't happen, or maybe, you know, look at another joint and see if you can sort of make it a little bit bigger to sort of encompass that. But that's what that means. If you run into that where you get like a weird sort of part of the mesh just shoots away, it's just because it got out of the influence of any of your joints because of how you were adjusting things. So you just have to fix it. So, and that really is the whole process. I mean, I could sit here and go through every single joint until this is completely finished, but that's not going to be very entertaining to watch. But that's it. You're just going to go along and you're going to go to each one of these joints and you're going to adjust it so that you can make sure that everything looks like it does when things are supposed to move. This front part will sort of compress and crunch down evenly. The back will stretch if you start to arch it a little bit when you bend it, or if you move your legs. The front of your legs crease properly and you get the right amount of stretching in the buttocks, and then you don't have any weird collapsing on the feet. You want to go along and make sure that your fingers are moving in and out correctly. And that's it. You're just making adjustments either with this tool right here or by painting weights on specific joints. And that's it. That's the whole binding process. And once you get done with that, you're finished. One thing that I should say to you though first is that before you bind, and this is really important, and I probably should have said this at the beginning, but it's probably fine on the tutorials, but as soon as you start working on your project or anything else, make sure that you delete your history and freeze your transforms on your mesh of your character. That's really, really important. So just make sure that before you do anything else, that you select this. You're going to freeze the transformations and you're going to delete the history. Do that before you bind, and then just do the process that we did right here. So, all right, thanks so much. This will be your finished tutorial, and then you can do your character. Bye.